Good morning and welcome to another exciting episode of the Legal Zone, where we do what, John?
We tackle injustice.
That's right. My name is Salon Phillips, and with me today I have the elegant, the sophisticated, the lovely Dr. Cheney. Welcome, Dr. Cheney.
Thank you.
We also have with us the astute, the incomparable, the legal scholar of all scholars, Mr. John Salandy. Welcome, John.
Good morning, Salon. Good morning.
Glad to see you. And we have a very special guest today, and I'll get to her in a minute. But first, our show. The Legal Zone is a show about injustice. We started off the show last year around the summertime because at our law firm and in our practice, we have clients who are everyday people who are experiencing some sort of injustice. They were going through something, and through our channel, they were able to come on the air and speak about the situation they were going through while the case was actually going on. So it gave them a mouthpiece, so to speak, to voice their frustration. And it turned out to be a very powerful tool for the client. It was therapeutic in some senses. The show went on to gain massive popularity. It opened the door for all walks of life to come on and talk about and share about an injustice that they've experienced or encountered. We've had some of the country's top attorneys come and talk about the injustices that they've seen. We had some of the world's most renowned journalists come and talk about injustices in their line of work. People from all areas of life come and they talk about an injustice because unfortunately injustice is not a respective of persons. Everyone deals with an injustice. And so that's what our show is about. But it all started with the client. And today we are back with an actual client who is going through something. So we will hear from her today. But before we do that, let's start with the law. I know my law students have taken the bar. Trust that you did well. And now here's another legal nugget. Let me share my screen and we'll get right into this. And this probably might be one of the most important shows that we've had to date because it touches and concerns everyone. There's a text, a biblical text that says, "For the living know that they shall die, but the dead know not anything." When you're dead, you don't know anything. If you know that you're going to die one day, then it behooves you to communicate with anyone before you die about what you want after you die. You must plan and communicate ahead of death. Makes sense. So with that, we talk about a will. Wills and estate is on the bar. If you had a question, hopefully you got it right. But let's talk about a will. What is a will? We've all heard about a will. Everyone living has heard about a will. What is it? A will or a testament is a person's last statement, their last attended thought, their last communication to the living. That's a will. Think of a will as your last chance to clear the air, to set the record straight, and to leave instructions on how you would like your belongings distributed. That's the key part. Some people in their will is a time when they let secrets out. They let it be known who that child father really is. They let it be known how they really felt about certain people. And you could do this to your will, with your will. But the main thing are the instructions. Okay, your time. This is your time. Say what you want. Instruct as you may. It's totally up to you. There's no right or wrong way. And some people have left some of the most strange instructions in their will. Just to get an idea, you all have heard of Napoleon. I have a picture of him. Napoleon, you know him, the conqueror. His final wish was to have his head shaved and his hair split among his friends. Can you imagine? John, I love you to death, but when you pass, I don't really need any of your hair. You could leave me something else. Another last will or instruction. A man left $5,000 to his 7 closest friends, provided they only use it for, quote unquote, a boozy weekend getaway in any European city. We're talking about instructions that people leave in their will. Another one, a man by the name of John Bowman, this is a true story, set up a $5,000 trust. His instructions were that every evening, his servants were to prepare a full meal, set the table and everything, and serve dinner, because he believed that he would return from the dead. And so he wanted to be sure that his dinner would be waiting for him. His servants did this from 1891 until 1950, when all the money finally ran out. I imagine after the first year, the servants had their friends come over and said, look, we got all this food. Nobody else is coming to get it. Y'all come on and eat. But these are instructions that people do. But now this begs the question, who is supposed to carry out these wishes or instructions of the deceased? Who's supposed to feed these people, take the money and do it? That's called the executor. The executor is someone you choose and you trust. They become under a legal obligation to carry out your wishes that's outlined in your will. That's the executor of a will. Now, what happens when a person dies without a will? That's called intestate. Intestate, when a person dies without a will, the term is called intestate. He died intestate. It just means he died without a will. So what happens when a person dies without a will? Every state has a set of rules that govern the distribution of a deceased's belongings when that person dies intestate. When they die without a will, every state has a list of ways that this person's stuff is supposed to be distributed. If you are married with no children, 100% of your stuff will go to your spouse. If you're not married, but you have children, then 100% of your stuff goes to your children, and it's divided equally amongst them. If you're married with children, some states divide 50-50. 50% or half of the dead spouse's belongings go to the spouse, and the other half go to the children. Other states require 1/3 of the belongings go to the spouse and 2/3 go to the children. Remember this. No spouse, no children, then it goes to your parents. No spouse, no children, no parents, then it gets divided amongst your siblings. So forth and so on. It goes all the way to cousins, aunts. If there's no family member surviving whatsoever and you die intestate, then the state will get your belongings and they'll do with it whatever they want to do with it. But here's another question. Who becomes the executor when a person dies intestate, again, without a will? Who is going to be the one responsible for carrying all this stuff out? Well, if you don't name a person to carry out the distribution set up by the state, who is responsible? It depends on who is living. It could be the spouse. It could be one of the children. It could be one of the siblings. It all depends on who is left behind. And that person will become the de facto executor of the estate. This person would become responsible for making sure that the distribution is aligned with the statutory guidelines. All right. Another term that you should remember, probate. What is probate? People talk about probate. Probate just simply means the official proving of a will. It's a process that ensures that the wishes of the deceased are valid and true. And this is a totally different area of law. Sometimes people challenge a will because they say, well, my dead spouse really didn't mean for that in the will. They must have been coerced or put under some sort of stress, or maybe the signature was forged. Probate takes care of that. And it also makes sure that the will is carried out, the wishes are carried out. But what happens if a person dies intestate? Then what? Probate is still needed. In this case, it would be probate court to ensure that the statutory distribution is carried out per state law. So who is responsible for carrying this to probate? Again, it depends on the deceased living family members. If it's the spouse, then it's the spouse's responsibility to do this. But what happens if and when a rogue family member decides to skip out on all of this and take matters into his or her own hands? That's why we're here today. Welcome, Miss Charmaine Salandy. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. How about you?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. Now, we understand you haven't met John yet, but you've seen his name on the complaint. He's one of the attorneys working on your case, and we're glad to have you as a client. And we know that what's going on is very stressful, but tell us what's happening. Start with who you are. Tell us who you are, where you live.
I'm Charmaine Salandy. I live in Huntsville, Alabama.
Okay. Do you have any brothers or sisters?
I have one sister,
Okay. And what's her name?
Shayla Salandy.
Okay. All right. And your mother, what's your mother's name?
Wendy Salandy, or I guess Wendy McMillan, after she got married.
Okay. So she was married after you and Shayla were born, is when she married?
Yes, she married him when we were all grown and out of the house. Maybe about 9 years ago, she married him.
Okay. What's your dad's name?
Barry Goodson.
Okay. And how's Barry Goodson doing?
He's doing pretty good. And he also said hello to you as well. I was talking to him last night and he said hello.
Okay, good. So tell us what happened. Your mom got married when you all were already grown.
Yes.
Okay.
And they moved to Georgia. He wanted to move to Georgia. So mom was like, fine. So she moved. She came down here. We were very close, her and her 3 grandkids. And so she would come down here twice a month. That was our deal. If she moves to Georgia, she has to come and visit us. And we've been doing that since they've been in Georgia for the last several years. And when she got sick, that's when I started going down there. At first, I started going to take care of her because, we were very close. And that's what my mother, I wanted to make sure she was okay.
Okay. And so she got sick. What happened when she got sick? When did this happen?
It was so the first, she had surgery on her knee. So I went down there and took care of her for a month. And I came back down. And next thing I noticed, she got COVID. And then, or that's what they said, she had COVID. And so before I could get down there, it's like she just went downhill so fast to where within a week of her, well, I say within 2 days of her finding out she had COVID, she was already hospitalized and everything just went downhill after that.
Now, what's her husband's name again?
Regan McMillan. And he could have taken her to the hospital a lot sooner than that when he did. When he saw that she wasn't eating, she wasn't getting up and doing anything, we had to call and tell her, please go to the hospital. And that's when he took her to the hospital.
Now, what was your relationship, you and your sister's relationship with him?
He's not a family-oriented person. And maybe within the last year, we really tried to, establish a relationship with him. And he was somewhat receptive, or he somewhat, wanted it, I guess, as well as us, but he wasn't a family-oriented person.
Okay. Did he, so he didn't spend much time with you and your sister individually?
No, he had a hard time understanding how close we were to my mother, to where it kind of really bothered him. And mama was like, I don't care how old they are. Those are my babies. And she told him that. And we took family trips every year. She would come and see her grandchildren's games. And it was just very surprising to him. He's like, your girls are grown. Why are you still treating them like babies? And she's like, until the day they die, those are my babies.
Did your mom and his name is Regan?
Yes.
Did they have any children together?
They did not have any children.
Okay. So, and then your mom, she has siblings?
She has about, I want to say five brothers and one sister, or
Okay.
four brothers and one, yeah, four brothers and one sister.
So it's a big family.
Yes, we have a large family.
So your mom got sick and she went to the hospital. Then what happened?
After she went to the hospital, we were calling around nurses and, just making sure she was treated well and they were taking the best care that they could of her. And they were wanting to do this and that. And Regan was like, yeah, let them put her on the ventilator. My mom was, she was just really scared. She did express her feelings that she was scared. And she was like, she called us FaceTime and she was like, my husband's okay with them putting me on the ventilator. And I talked to him about it and he really made me feel like he cared about her genuinely. Like he recorded some of their talks and he would send them to me. So it was just very surprising how he treated me when it was kind of like, I feel like he was doing all of this just to get me on his side and just make sure he was there when he just really wasn't. Because when she was passed, it was as if he didn't care about us at all.
We're gonna get to that. So she's in the hospital. He's there with her.
So he ended up getting COVID or whatever she had, but it was nothing compared because he ended up taking himself to the hospital 2 days after her. He got admitted and he was released within, I don't even think he was there for a week. He was there, they discharged him with oxygen and he told me he was coming to visit her a couple of times a week, but I don't know really how often he was seeing her. He told me a couple of days a week because he said he was getting help himself, so he couldn't see her too often.
And what month are we in now? And year.
She got sick in October of 2021.
Okay, so just last year.
Yes.
And then how long was she in the hospital?
She was in there for a month. She went in around October 5th, the beginning of October, and she was gone. They've been wanting us to pull the plug on her. The hospital wanted us to pull the plug on her sooner. And I'm like, we know people that's been in comas and stuff that induced her in a coma so her body can get stronger. And I'm like, there's people that are in comas for several months. I'm like, I'm not giving up on my mother. And so when the doctor was telling us, she's suffering. And when I saw her and she looked a lot worse than a week ago, and he was just telling me all the things that can go wrong, keeping her in the condition she was in. I called Regan and I told him, and he was like, I'm on my way. And November 3rd is when we let them take her off of the ventilator. And she went away.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. So you had the funeral.
Yes.
And that's in Georgia.
The funeral was here in Huntsville.
Huntsville.
Mm-hmm.
Was her husband there?
Yes. And we actually had a family meeting after she passed. Before I came to Huntsville, it was very important that because she told me how she wanted to be buried, where she wanted to be at. And so I just wanted to make sure he was on the same page and he didn't do anything behind my back.
So
Because
she was having these conversations directly with you.
Yes, she was having these conversations with me, and I didn't know if she was having them with him. So me and all my uncles, we went over to his house and my grandmother, and I told him, my mom said she did not want to be buried. She wanted to be in a wall, and she wanted to be at Valhalla. That's where her dad is, and her grandparents. And so he said he did know where she wanted to be in a wall, but he didn't know about the Valhalla part. And I'm like, well, we're in Huntsville, and she would want to be there with her father. And he did not actually fight me on that. I was prepared to take legal action against him on that, but he didn't fight me on that at all.
Now, this is the question. Did she have a will?
She did not have a will. We talked, and the crazy part is, and I know she didn't, she really thought she was going to beat this because I've always talked to her about having a will because she always expressed to me that Regan is selfish. He's money hungry. She's told our family that because she had money in certain accounts that he did not even know about. I knew about it because she wanted those accounts to go to me and her children and grandkids. And when I told him about it, he took it from me. And that was just, everything was about money. He didn't plan her funeral. All he did was show up, and he did not want to pay for it. He wanted us to use our little bit of money we had and pay for it. He just showed up. That was all he did.
So no will. So we talked about intestate. So by law, Georgia has actually 1/3 of her belongings go to the spouse, and then 2/3 would have gone to you and your sister. Did anything go to you?
All he allowed us to get was her clothes and her shoes. He gave us a couple of purses, but I don't think he knew what the purses was worth, or he would have never gave us that. He would have sold that. So whatever he felt like was not of any value to him, that's what he gave us. And the rest he discarded, and he would not let us, he didn't even let us come in the house. He put all her stuff in the garage.
And when you say the other stuff, what other stuff were there?
So my mother loves jewelry. She's been collecting jewelry since she was in her early 20s. I have the first picture. She's like around 23, and she loved her jewelry. She also liked arts and crafts. So she had her machines and stuff where she did her nails. She did the little shoes, the Crocs and stuff. She was just very artsy. Her glasses. She had a lot of pictures when we were on Inglewood, when she was in Huntsville. Growing up, she had these nice, she always had her house nice. So she had a lot of items, but
Vehicles, were there any vehicles that she owned?
yes, she did. She had one, and actually that's the car I learned how to drive in. She had a Honda, and she always said, and she told him she didn't want to sell that car. She wanted it to stay in the family. And so he knew that, and everyone in the family did, because actually my husband tried to buy it from her. And she's like, nope, we're keeping it in the family. So she planned on saving it for us, because she said one time she was going to give it to me. And then when I bought a truck, she was like, well, she'll just save it.
Did you get any of it?
I didn't get anything. All I got was her shoes, her clothes, and that was it. I didn't get anything else.
So where is all of this stuff?
So when I went, I rented a U-Haul, and so I asked him, because her jewelry, I just wanted the sentimental things, the things that she had before him. I didn't even want everything. I just wanted a couple of pieces of her jewelry to pass down to my children. And he sat there, he looked me in my eyes, and he told me he sold it. And I was like, it's only been a week since she's been in the wall. And I'm like, you sold it already? He said, well,
Wait a minute, you said a week after she passed, he sold this stuff?
a week after her funeral.
Funeral.
That's when I found out he sold it. He told me he sold it.
Is this him?
Yes, that's him.
Okay,
Yeah.
go ahead.
He told me he sold it when he came down here for her funeral. And that I was upset. Like, how could you sell it while you came down here to Huntsville for her funeral? Like, did you do it the day after? He told me he did it the day after for her funeral because he needed that to pay for her funeral. And I'm like, are you serious? She had a life savings. He had a life savings for her, and no, the life insurance. And I'm like, are you serious? But yet I asked him, I said, so can I go in her sunroom? After I found that out, I didn't want to speak to him. I didn't want anything. And my sister had mentioned to him, and I was like, well, can I go in her sunroom to get her arts and crafts stuff? He told me he was not ready to go in there, and he'll go through that room later. So that let me know he didn't want me in the house because he wanted to go through what he wanted to sell. And if it was no value to him, then I could have it. But I just couldn't.
Is this another picture of him?
Yes, that is him. That's why we're down there in Georgia visiting her.
So Two quick things before I bring Dr. Cheney in. Was there any money involved? Did your mom set aside any money for you and your sister?
She had an account that he had no clue about. And it was just her savings account. And she told me if anything ever happened to her, she told me how she wanted it to go because she had a life insurance policy with me and my sister. And then she had one for him and her, him and her. She told me specifically, if anything happened, that money is for you and your sister. Let him pay for the funeral. And I told him what she said. And then when I was down there, she wanted to put my name on an account. And actually, she told Aunt Jennifer the same thing because she didn't know the law. She thought I had to be there for her to put my name on the account. And when she got sick, she didn't get that chance to do that. And so when she passed away, he actually sat there and told one of my uncles, I'm going through all her accounts and all this stuff. He was closing accounts, opening it. He was going through all her bank stuff before she was even in the wall. Like before her funeral, that's all he did was calling banks and closing them out and everything. And I'm like, are you serious? She's not even in the wall yet. And that's all he cared about was her money.
And so the money that she had left for you and your sister, did you ever get that?
No, he told me when I told him about it, he said I could have it. And I have text messages where he told me I could have it. And it's crazy because when he told me I could have it, it was like during the weekend. So that Monday morning I called. And the guy said, well, I just spoke to her husband. I called the bank after I talked to her again because I wanted to make sure, he did not do what the bank man told me that he did. So he beat me to that person, to the bank. And he said, well, I've already talked to her husband and he closed it out and we're actually mailing him a check. And I'm like, he could have told me that already when I asked him. So when I text him back, at first I called him, he didn't answer. So I texted him, I said, well, remember that account that we talked about? They said that they're sending you out a check. He acted as if I didn't even text him. I'm like, are you serious?
He didn't respond back?
No, he did not respond back. He completely ignored that whole bank and the whole conversation.
How long ago was that?
This was maybe 2 weeks after her funeral because I did wait a little longer. My family felt like I should have been on top of things, knowing what my mom told me about them, but it was too hard losing her to where I didn't care about certain things, I would have given anything to have her here with us. And all he cared about was money. And I guess I waited too late and he took everything.
So he took all the jewelry, he took all the car.
Yes.
And then all the money that your mother had put to the side for you and your sister, he took that.
Yes, he took everything from us.
And he's not responding to you, your text message or your calls.
No, he actually got upset and sent me a nasty text because he thought I said something. And without even clearing that up, he sent me a nasty text. And I'm like, please leave me alone. Like, I'm going through enough. I'm already upset and angry. You sold all my mama's jewelry. Like, he sold my grandmother's wedding ring that her husband gave to her. Like, he didn't know that these jewelries had sentimental values to us. Like the jewelry I bought her as a kid for Mother's Day and this stuff, like my dad bought her stuff and for me to give to her, and he took everything away from us.
Dr. Cheney, let me get you in here.
Hello, how are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Okay, hanging in there. I need just a little bit more, and I think the audience would be interested. Tell us a little bit about the background of your mother. You said she was in arts and crafts.
Yes.
And the background of the husband, and how did they meet?
So my mom, ever since I was a kid, she was very artsy. She did her nails. Like everyone that knew her knew she liked the fine things. Like she did her own nails. Her nails were like out to there. Like she loved to look nice, beautiful. Everyone that knew her knew she loved her jewelry. She was just very sophisticated and just like nice things. She did cups, nails, shirts, shoes. She was just very creative. And they actually met through my aunt, actually. So my aunt was talking to his friend. They went to Waffle House, and I guess he asked his friend for my mom's number because he didn't even speak to her at the restaurant. And a week later, he called my mom over the phone. He got her number from someone else. So that's how they met. He got her number from another guy. And after that, they started going on dates. And we always knew he was off a little bit because his own kids, he doesn't have a relationship with them at all. He's not outgoing. He's not sociable. He didn't like her being a family person. So he moved her away to Georgia, trying to isolate her from us.
Yeah. How old were they basically?
My mom, she was 53. He's 3 years older than her. He just turned 57, I believe, in January.
Okay. Well, I just wanted those background questions, but I have 3 quick ones for you. Can you discuss the frequency of contact with your mother and if that mattered at all in what happened?
As far as like how me and my mom communicated,
Yeah, the frequency of interacting, yeah.
we talked at least every other day, and it probably would have been a lot more, but sometimes, I go through my little phases, and she's like, Charmaine, when I call you, better pick up that phone. And
Mhm.
she got me back one time. She felt like I saw her call and I didn't answer. So when I called her back, she didn't answer my phone call. So that taught me, because I always worried about her. And I always told her she didn't answer my phone call, I was gonna do a welfare check on her to make sure she was okay.
Why
So
did you worry about her?
just being around him, she told us some disturbing things about him. And I actually have did a welfare check. She was supposed to come to Huntsville for one of my daughter's birthdays, and she didn't. And I was calling him, calling her, and he didn't even have the audacity to tell me she was in the hospital. I didn't find out she was in the hospital until I called the police and sent them over there. And they told him and called me back. And my mom was like, you could have answered your phone and told Sherman I was in the hospital, but he told me nothing. So he knows, like when it comes to her, she's my world. We talked about everything. She was my friend, my doctor, my counselor.
Mm.
She was everything. If I had problems with one of my kids, she was there for my kids. They got in trouble at school. She held us accountable. She was the foundation to my family. She kept all her brothers and sisters in line. Like she was that strong person for everybody. And we did not know until she passed. We're now starting to find out things that she was going through. And I just feel bad because she was going through all of this alone. We didn't know what all he was putting her through until going through his stuff. I didn't know he had a baby on her. He was cheating on her. And it just hurts because I'm going through all her stuff and seeing all this. And it's like, did he really love her?
Yeah. So is there a suggestion here that there was abuse?
Well, I know my mother didn't play as far as the hidden and everything, but as far as if she was scared to leave him, I don't know that. I just found out that she would sometimes go and stay in a hotel because she got tired of him cheating on her. And no, she didn't tell anyone. She told a family friend that stays in Georgia to come pick her up because she was at a hotel and she had to go to the doctor. And I guess he wouldn't take her, or they were into it. He didn't really care about her welfare, her mental health, her physical. My mom had a lot of health problems as far as she had to get both of her knees replaced, and he just was not supportive. I had to come and take care of her. He let her fall one time, and that's why I was like, when it came to my mother, I'm dropping everything.
Yeah. So if you were talking about the most shocking thing, what stands out as being the most shocking thing that have occurred in all of this?
Between their relationship, when I found out that she was staying in a hotel, because my mom, knowing her, she was just a very strong woman. And when they stayed on Inglewood here in Huntsville, if he was to do that, she would have put him out. And so that let me know that that house that they're in, she didn't feel like that was home because she would have never left. She would have made him leave. So for her to just get out of that house, that was the most disturbing thing. That I talked to her all the time. I didn't know. She never once told me she was in a hotel. And I guess that's the part that hurts, because she was such a great mother that no matter what she was going through with him, we never knew any of this. I never knew how often he was cheating on her. I never knew she was staying in a hotel.
And the last thing I want to know, how long between the divorce from your father and the marriage to this husband?
So I'm her firstborn. My parents were never married. And since I want to say they separated when I was like 1 year old, I don't have any memory of them ever being together.
Okay. Thank you, and I'm sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
Thank you. John, you want to jump in?
Well, I think the first thing is to follow on what Dr. Cheney just said, is I really offer you my sympathies, both, I guess, near term and long term, because there's so many losses that you've experienced here. You know, having lost your mother through illness is one thing, but then learning all of these other things, it sounds doubly, triply painful. And then how he has treated you all. So it's just been loss after loss. And I think that's where to start, is giving you my sympathies on that. I know, having lost my mother, how difficult that was. And so I can only imagine, given how you've described your relationship with her, how hard it has been since. So, but then we get to turn to this gentleman and our, I guess, our theme of injustice. And
I just want to say, no, go ahead.
well, that, you know, the injustices here are many. The injustice toward your mother, clearly what you've been talking about now, and how maybe it didn't amount to what you might call textbook abuse, but certainly was not treated well. I don't think there would be any question about that. That she was treated well and was certainly felt out of place at times, and yet, as you're also saying, never wanted to put that on anybody else. She carried that all alone, and that is an injustice for anyone to have to feel that they cannot share their difficulty. And I'm sure that was very hard on her to feel like, oh no, I have to carry this all alone.
And I do want to say something, John, really quick. And I actually want to say something directly to, is his name Regan?
Yes.
Regan McMillan. Dave, he's our show's producer. He works magic. He has a way of targeting our show to certain areas of the world, certain people. Dave, when you edit this, do what you can to target this to Atlanta, Jonesboro, the entire Atlanta, I mean, the entire state of Georgia, just flood it, because I want Mr. McMillan, Regan, to see this. And I want everyone he knows to see this. I want everyone who he may know in the future, who doesn't know him yet. I want them to see this particular show. Because Regan, this is directly for you. If you're going to watch this, because we're going to send it to you. I spoke to you on the phone and you said that you would get back with me. You never did. You told me that you would send your attorney to talk to me. No attorney has never contacted me. You know that. I imagine that when you spoke to me, you thought that you were speaking to just another disinterested attorney who was representing a disconnected client. Nothing could be further from the truth. And Dr. Cheney, this is what I didn't let you know. Even though, and I'm keeping it together, even though my last name is Phillips, I'm a Salandy. What you did to my cousin, what you're doing to her daughters and her siblings, you're doing it to me. If there's one thing that we do for the rest of this year at our firm, at our show, is going to bring justice to you. We're going to hand deliver justice to your doorsteps. What you did is atrocious. What you did is egregious, thoughtless. This was your wife. And you did it. I couldn't make it to the funeral, so we haven't met each other face to face. But we're going to meet face to face. And soon. Go ahead, John.
Well, and that brings us, of course, to the other aspect of the injustice here, the legal side, which Salon has now alluded to. And as he mentioned earlier, Georgia law is absolutely crystal clear. And it isn't often one can say that law is crystal clear. That's why there are lawyers, because the law is rarely crystal clear. But Georgia law is very clear about, when a person dies without a will and there's a spouse and children, that estate gets divided among the remaining spouse and the children equally, to the extent of no less than 1/3 going to the spouse. But in your case, with a spouse and 2 children, then each of you, that is Mr. McMillan, and you and your sister should have received 1/3 of the entirety of whatever it is that your mother had. And he didn't do that. And he didn't do anything near what that would be. And in doing so, he violated Georgia law in a variety of ways. That was just the first of many. And so that's where the injustice is going to next get played out. And no, we can't do anything about how he treated your mother, and nor can we really get fully to the heart of how he has treated you and your sister. But we can hold him accountable. He could have made this simple.
Yes.
But I guess this is one of those, well, sort of like that Maya Angelou quote, not directly, because this came from your mother, but that's close enough. When somebody tells you who they are, believe them.
Yeah.
Your mother, if she could say this about a man she married, that, he's money hungry, he's this, he's that. Yeah, it's one of those moments where, I gotta believe him. Well, okay, at that moment, he made a mistake, a big error. And
we see the importance of having a will, right? We do these seminars, and I've done tons of wills for people over the last year, but I think this case shows the exact reason why it's so important. Because if you're married and then you have a split up, and some people, they split up with their spouse and they never divorce, they go on with their lives, but you pass without a will, your things now go to that spouse who might be with someone else who haven't seen you or talked to you for years. So this is why it's so important. Everyone who's watching this, if you don't have a will, take the time and draft one.
that brings up the point of being very careful. And this is a hard thing to do, both as the person drawing up the will and anybody you would ask. But who is going to be, raise this question, Salandy, who is going to be the executor? Because more often than not, the person your mother would have picked would have been him. And at that point, the will would have failed in its
Or
purpose.
probably her, I think she was
Well,
closer to her.
it may have been Charmaine, although if he had known about this, he probably would have objected. But let's just go with it that typically the first person you would think of is the spouse. And there the will would have lost all of its usefulness because everything he's done in the situation that he was in, he could just have easily have done if there was a will.
Right.
He's violated Georgia law that talks about what happens when there is not a will. This is how this is going to go. The state has laid this all out very carefully. And he didn't do it.
Yeah, as we said in the beginning, he was a rogue executor who just did everything he wants to do. But you raise a very important point. Who you choose as the executor, it has to be someone that you trust. Ideally, it has to be someone that you won't outlive, right? That's why I usually say, it's not going to be a parent, could possibly be a spouse, but more than likely someone who might be a little younger, because they might be someone who's in a better place to outlive you, and they can make sure that all your wishes are carried out.
And someone, if possible, who is disinterested. That is, they're not a beneficiary. I had a situation with a relative of mine that she had set up a will, and she has 2 sons, and she had actually named the spouse of one of the sons to be the executor. But there was some difficulty between the sons at times. And it came to a point where she felt that the person she had named would not be disinterested to divide her estate equally between the 2 sons. Why? Because the spouse was married to one of the sons. And so, yeah, that became an issue. And now having to rework the will to say, well, yeah, who can you do this in such a way? And it isn't always easy, because finding someone disinterested often means having to, let's say, hire somebody. You have an external, a lawyer, a this, a that, a bank, some kind of a trustee, and then they have to get paid and all of that and blah, blah, blah. So I'm not saying that's an easy issue, but at least it's one, since this is going out to salon students and other students of the law. Oh yeah, get a will, but think carefully about who you choose. And if it's possible to have somebody who is not going to directly benefit, or at least not benefit much, they may be able, let's say the will names them to get something, but as long as it's not much, because then there's always this issue of, are they biased in some way? So,
and as a warning to everyone else out there who might try to go rogue, how many causes of action did we come up with in this case?
oh, there are 10. I believe there are 10. And
10 areas of violations. Causes of action is a reason to sue someone that Mr. Regan is going to have coming to him in an attempt to defend.
And under Georgia law and in general, and I'm sure it's not strictly Georgia, many of these provisions make punitive damages available, as well as compensatory damages, and you may want to unwrap that a little bit, Salon.
So compensatory damages, they're determined, they are intended to compensate for a loss. And some of the items that Charmaine lost, they're priceless, right? She mentioned her grandmother's ring this man sold. You can't put a price tag on that. So the compensatory damages are meant to compensate the person for the loss. Then there's the punitive damage. Punitive damage is meant to strictly punish the person for the wrong that they've done. It's intended to hit them hard enough to where they would think twice about doing it again. Punitive damages. And so we're coming at him. You could imagine, I don't want to state it on the air of how hard we're coming at him, but we're coming at him fairly hard. And we're going to make sure that, again, that he pays for what he's intentionally have done to this family.
And the punitive damages are often much more than the compensatory damages.
Right.
And even if we take the sentimental value, let's just for the moment set that aside, 1/3 of the value, the reasonable value of what your mother had as of last October, that's, we'll call it X. Whatever that was, you would get 1/3 of X. The punitive damages, even if he were willing to.
Her and her sister would get 1/3, because remember.
Right, 1/3 to Charmaine, 1/3 to Shayla, 1/3 to him. The punitive damages could easily be 3 to 5 times that.
Right.
So it really is a serious thing. I mean, it's an attempt to get a justice where an injustice has occurred.
Yes.
And we hope when he receives this complaint this week, he begins to take this a lot more seriously than the original quite serious letter Salon sent him in January, which could have resolved this relatively easily and quickly. But as they say, we can do this the easy way, or we can do this the hard way. And we're now about to bring the hard way right to his doorstep.
Charmaine, thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your story with the world. I know this is a hard time, and there's nothing that could happen to him that's going to make it any better. But we'll do our best to make sure justice is had in this case.
Thank you so much. I really do appreciate you guys a lot.
Dr. Cheney, I'm going to let you end the show for us. Any words of advice, wisdom?
Yeah, just hang in there and be strong. Who owned the house where they moved to?
So I know for a fact his name is on there. I'm not sure. I want to say my mother's name was on there too as well. Both of their names was on the house.
Which
But I do know that she sold her house here in Huntsville to be able to get that house in Georgia.
And that's a very good point, Dr. Cheney. Whenever real property, real estate, homes are purchased after a marriage, it becomes marital property. So that is going to come at issue in this suit that we have against Mr. McMillan.
Okay.
Thank you again, Charmaine.
Okay, thank you so much.
John?
We're there for you.
Yes, we are.
I really appreciate it.
John Salandy, thank you. Dr. Cheney, thank you again.
Okay.
Thanks for watching our video. For experienced legal services in Washington, D.C., Alabama, and Washington State, visit our website at remaslaw.com or call us at 1-833-329-1799.